Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really interested in the Krays, check out our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London. A direct link for the group is in the YouTube description section. We're a friendly and moderated group which has been running since January 2018, and we have over 19,000 members. Come and give us a try sometime.
Hello again. We continue the story of the Kray twins' early days as they started out on their path to eventual criminal infamy. And thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy it. In our last episode, we had been talking about Ronnie Kray's dream of a big showdown with the old guard of London's underworld, the Spot and Hill gangs. And in 1955, which had begun so hopefully for the twins, ended with a big setback when Ronnie and Reggie were denied the chance to play a real part in the last rounds of the Jack Spot and Billy Hill feud that went on until the spring of 1956. Spot and Hill were aging and in decline. They didn't want a shootout with the up-and-coming Krays. They were more interested in getting out of London crime altogether and in one piece while they had the chance. They didn't accept the challenge on offer from the Valence Road deadly duo. For a while, they had had hopes. Nominal allies still of Spot, both twins and various followers did start coming west. Most evenings they would drop in at a club off the Tottenham Court Road, where Spot still held court as in the old days. They had a certain status now and found that they were getting talked about. One of Jack Spot's more genial lieutenants taught them a thing or two. Reggie began thinking of the money waiting to be picked up in the West End. Ronnie was thinking of machine guns, bombs, and full-scale war that would exterminate Hill's following, leaving the Kray twins free to rule London as Capone ruled Chicago. The only trouble was Jack Spot. True, he did take them racing once again to Leeds, but this was not what they wanted. He would not educate them, as they had hoped, about his rackets. These were his secret. Nor would he use them in a real fight. He wanted money, not machine guns. On the May night in 1956, when Frankie Fraser and Alf Warren waited for Jack Spot outside his flat in Bayswater and put a second set of gashes in his face, the twins weren't there. They visited him in hospital the next day. Now was the moment for the war they had waited for. They guaranteed they could control London within 24 hours. All that was needed was for Spot to give the word. Jack Spot rolled over in his bed and looked the other way. Jack Spot retired and bought a bowler hat and a furniture business off the Gloucester Road. Billy Hill retired and bought a white Lincoln convertible and a house in southern Spain. An era of so-called organized crime was over. London was hotting up. No single organization could control it, certainly not with the old-fashioned methods of Spot and Hill. The twins went back to Bethnal Green. With Jack Spot's help, they could have moved in on the rich rackets of the West End. Without him, they were lost. Had he done as they asked and educated them, things could have been different. With Jack Spot's help, they could have moved in on the rich rackets of the West End. Without him, they were lost. Had he done as they asked and educated them, things could have been different. But they both lacked the knowledge and support to fight for the succession on their own. Control of West End crime was passing to a loose federation of existing gangs, the most important being the Italians. They were anxious to warn any of Spot's old allies against ideas of a comeback. A list was prepared. Various people on it began to be cut in painful places. News reached the twins that it was their turn next. For several days, Fort Valence was more fortress-like than usual. Nobody saw the twins, and rumors started. They had been killed together, and their bodies were laid out in Valence Road, embalmed according to a secret clause in the Colonel's will. They had both fled the country and were living it up in the Bahamas on the great fortune Billy Hill had paid to buy them off. They were in prison. Finally, they emerged. At around 10 o'clock at night, their old van, filled once again with armed men from the billiard hall, collected them from the house and set off west along the Clerkenwell Road. It drew up opposite the social club the Italians used as their headquarters. Ronnie stepped out. As colonel, he possessed a medieval concept of the rules of war. The leader went in first. Reggie and the others watched through spy holes cut in the side of the van. It was a dramatic entry. Several of the men who had put Ronnie on the list were standing at the bar. "Some of you want to settle some business with me and my brother. We're here. Let's get it over with." No one replied. "Can't you speak English?" Someone threw a bottle at his head. The colonel drew his heavy Mauser automatic and fired 3 shots in return. Perhaps he aimed to hit the wall. Perhaps his marksmanship was bad. Nobody tried to stop him as he walked back to the van. Ronnie Kray was never to forget this moment. It was an answer of a sort to the fiasco of the night at Islington. This was how life should be lived, and victories won. This proved what he had always said, that the rich gangs of the West were soft and would collapse if anyone stood up to them. If someone like Jack Spot could govern the West End for 10 years with a gang like this, think what the twins could do. What they forgot was that Spot's power had come not out of violence, but from its opposite, his skill in avoiding it. Like an old condottiere, his greatest battles had been those he never had to fight. His gang, his big cigars, the drink and the occasional brawls were his facade. Behind it was a skillful fixer, an underworld diplomat who could negotiate between the clubs, the racketeers, the other gangs, and always fix a deal. Hill was the same, and ultimately a smarter man than Spot. But both took a lot of trouble not to offend the police. There was an unspoken understanding between them and the law. Hill and Spot could keep their position provided there was no trouble to the general public, and they kept their men in order. Behind this understanding lay a realistic old-time policeman's philosophy. Cities will always have a certain level of crime, and there is something to be said for tolerating one gang that knows the rules rather than face a horde of unknown criminals. This was anathema to the twins. In their way, they were very honest. They both loved violence. They loathed the law. They believed in being what they were. By their lights, Spot was a phony. They would become the real thing. Spot's men had been the washouts of the West End. They would fight their battles with the toughest tearaways of the East End, and they would have none of the Spot Hill understandings with the law. If it were necessary to fight, they'd go to the limit. If Ronnie had to kill, he'd kill. We weren't just playing kids' games anymore. Now as the twins aspired to greater power, Many things changed, their gang included. It was still based on the billiard hall, but Ronnie was right. The kids' games were over. There were still jokes, of course. Ronnie put on various acts, and there were as many guests and drunken evenings as ever. The twins remained good hosts and continued to have good parties. But they no longer seemed to have the old-style gang fights for the hell of it. Everything had to have a purpose. Even the hall seemed less of a club now, more of a business. Many old faces started to stay away. This was inevitable. The twins' contemporaries were moving into their middle 20s. Many were thinking of marriage. Marriage meant settling to a steady job, keeping away from trouble, staying at home at night, saving and not spending. One of those who dropped out said, "It's very sad, but if you're serious about a bird, you just can't help yourself. You have to go straight, at least for a while." One thing was certain. Once I was courting, I just had to choose either the twins or the girl I wanted to marry. And when I'd married her, there was the flat to pay for and the hire purchase. Then the two kids arrived. I'd see the twins. Ronnie would say, "When are you coming out with us again?" I'd say I'd be around next week, but never went. Somehow there wasn't time. "Always it's bloody women," Ronnie muttered. "Women's our worstest enemy. Why can't they keep their places anymore? They don't want men these days. What they want's lapdogs." Lapdogs or not, old friends were leaving as they were absorbed into the straight women's world of the New East End. There had never been a style of life like this before. LCC maisonettes, new schools, television, supermarkets, car, and a wife determined to keep her looks and her husband. There was a demolition order on the billiard hall. New flats would soon go up in Eric Street, but the new middle-class East End was no life for the twins, even if they had wanted it. Ronnie was openly homosexual by now. Reggie had no time for women. The new pattern of East End gang life fitted a younger age group. Hooliganism ended by the early 20s. Now that the twins were planning a new war, they needed other outcasts like themselves. In the East End, anyone serving a sentence is simply referred to as an away. Any close friend of the twins who was away had always been looked after. The twins had a keen sense of responsibility over such things. They wrote, they visited and did what they could to stop the man worrying about life outside. If there was trouble with the rent, they'd see to it. If he had heard his woman was playing around, they made certain she was warned to be faithful, or at least discreet. At Christmas time, they sent a box of groceries to the family, and when release day came, the twins would usually be outside the prison gates to offer £1 or £2 and a lift home in their car. They were genuinely kind to those they liked and had a knack of making kindness work. But at the same time, this concern for the aways was a real source of loyalty. Now that their following was changing, it did as much as anything to place their organization on a professional footing. News travels nowhere faster than in prison, and it soon got round that the Kray twins were genuine governors who looked after their own. This gave them status, and their reputation spread through different jails and into the wide world of working criminals. This sort of reputation, coupled with their name, offered the twins a useful reservoir of talent for the future. Once it was known that any villain on release had only to call in at the billiard hall to be sure of a fiver and some quick excitement, the twins could be quite sure of finding just the men they needed. Discipline at the billiard hall was tighter now. The battles waged were more determined. Ronnie began thinking of what he called the politics of crime, and genuine criminals started to take the place of the happy tearaways of the year before. This new following became known as the Firm. By 1956, its power had spread through Hackney and Mile End, down to Walthamstow. South lay the river to the north. Islington was being run by their old friends, the Nashes. Within the area they controlled, the twins were supreme. Each thief, each gambling club, most of the pubs and many businesses paid something to the Firm for the right to prosper. For the first time in their lives, the twins looked like becoming rich. Reggie had his first big American car and a succession of good-looking chauffeurs. The big time was beginning. But although the fame of the twins was spreading and criminals talked about them as the most dangerous mob in London, the boys with the real future, one thing was lacking: the power to expand. Ronnie was planning his battles and hoped for alliances to carry the Firm into the West End. None of them quite worked. The Firm was just a little too dangerous for other gangs to want to know. Despite all Ronnie's challenges, not even Frankie Fraser wanted a real gunfight. The West End closed itself against the twins. This was frustrating, especially to Ronnie. Though he had money now, a car, a thick gold wristwatch, these didn't count. His best possessions were his guns. When he went out, he had a sword stick and a .32 Beretta that scarcely showed beneath his well-cut suit. This was his personal weapon, although he had others. With the Beretta, he took trouble filing the ends of the slugs and cutting them to make dum-dum bullets, just like those with which Capone's men once blasted large holes in their enemies. It was not only gang war that he wanted. He talked of doing people all the time. Traitors were round him, and he began to make a list of those who'd have to go. People would talk about the Colonel's list. Many would worry about it, since he proclaimed that he was psychic and could tell people's motives from their aura. He consulted a lady clairvoyant from Walthamstow. She told him he was under the protection of a powerful spirit guide who guarded him and who would tell him what to do through his inner voice. All that the Colonel had to do was listen. Even Reggie, who disapproved of all this spiritualist stuff and meddling with things you can't understand, was impressed. That autumn, a car site owner in the Bethnal Green Road sold a young docker a second-hand Austin 8 for £120. It was a straight deal for cash, but the next day, the man returned with the car, saying it burned oil and that he wanted his money back. The dealer refused. Shouting started. "I'll be back tomorrow with my friends from over the water." A few minutes later, he was on the telephone to Valence Road. Ronnie's moment had come. For some while now, the twins had made a tidy income out of the local car dealers, partly from ordinary protection. They went to work with paint stripper and £7 hammers on the stock of one dealer who thought he didn't need them, and partly by helping out if a customer occasionally turned nasty. This rarely happened. When it did, the mention of the twins' name was usually enough to smooth things over or ensure payment. The twins had no desire for trouble with the ordinary public. This case was different. The threat of a rival gang from south of the Thames was a direct challenge. Ronnie Kray's voices told him he must act. Early next morning, one of the firm was posted on the lookout by the car site. When the docker arrived with all his friends, he was to telephone the billiard hall. Whatever happened then, Ronnie would deal with personally. He had a long wait and sat there in his chair in the empty hall, steadily working himself into a rage. This was no time for weakness. This was war. Once an outside gang came on his territory, he would show everyone the power of the Krays. He chose a Luger. He put on his big Capone-style overcoat. Then the call came to say the docker had arrived. In fact, he'd come alone and wanted to apologize. So did the dealer. Both had calmed down since the day before and were discussing things when the door was kicked open and in stormed the colonel and his driver. The driver had a knife in his hand. The docker tried to hit him, but before he could, the Luger fired twice, and he was on the floor clutching his leg. No one spoke. The colonel looked for the South Londoners. Satisfied that they weren't there, he left, slamming the door behind him. The only sign of his presence was the reek of cordite and the growing pool of blood on the floor. As someone said afterwards, it wasn't like real life. It was all straight out of a gangster film. Everyone realized the shooting had been a mistake. Everyone but Ronnie, who had been thrilled to pull the trigger. Provided he was daring enough, he could get away with it. Provided he listened to his voices, he would never fail. Action was what counted. Everyone involved now rallied round to save him. The dealer had to. Unless he hushed things up at once, he knew that he could easily end up in the dock with Ronnie Kray on a charge of attempted murder. And so, before the wounded man bled to death, or the police arrived, he had him bundled into a car and one of the men on the site rushed him round to Bancroft Road Hospital. He dumped him in the outpatients, then drove off before anyone asked any questions. The docker was under surgery. And the real game started as the police came in and tried to get someone talking. Ronnie did nothing. This was his privilege. After a long tirade, Reggie was taking care of him. Within an hour of the shooting, he was safely hidden in an anonymous flat in Walthamstow. He spent his time quite happily listening to operatic records, drinking bottled beer, and trying to remember every detail of what it had been like to shoot a man. Soon, he was working on his list and choosing who would go next. All the real work fell on Reggie. He was the one who had to tie up every possible loose end if Ronnie were to be saved from joining the Aways for the next 10 years. The dealer was no problem. Scared of the law and frightened of the Krays, he would do anything to avoid incriminating himself. So would his employees. The real problem was the wounded man, who was just coming round from the anesthetic with a policeman by his bed. Once he really talked, Ronnie was finished. Reggie would have to see he didn't. The story will continue in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.